My name is Marissa Hale. I'm 34 years old. There are mornings that etch themselves into your bones, mornings that change everything before the coffee even cools in your mug. For me, it was the morning Adrian stood in our kitchen with the sun spilling across his face, but none of its warmth touched him. His eyes were cold, detached, like I was a stranger trespassing in my own home. "We need to talk," he said, his arms folded so tightly across his chest it looked like he was holding himself together. I braced myself. We had been circling around tension for weeks. Snapped words, missed dinners, nights where he disappeared into his phone instead of my eyes. I had imagined a dozen arguments that might finally burst open, but I hadn't imagined this. "I want to end this," he said flatly. His voice carried no tremor, no regret. "My father left me $5 million. I don't need this anymore. I don't need you." Silence spread through the room like spilled ink. $5 million. I should have felt dizzy, shocked, even jealous. Instead, all I felt was the sharp edge of betrayal. 11 years. 11 years of my life given to him. I supported Adrian through grad school when we ate ramen 3 nights a week. I helped him launch his boutique consulting firm, tapping my savings, and even selling my motorcycle to cover his first set of office furniture. And now, because of a number in a bank account, I was disposable. I searched his face for any crack, any flicker of hesitation that said this wasn't about money, but love gone wrong. Nothing. Just arrogance disguised as freedom. He waited for me to fall apart, to beg, to rage, but I wouldn't give him that satisfaction. My voice came out calm, colder than I expected. "Okay," I said, "let's end it." His expression faltered, like my acceptance broke his script. He had expected fireworks, tears, some desperate promise to fight for him. Instead, I left him with emptiness. Within a week, I sold the house. It had been mine long before Adrian, a fact he conveniently forgot in his greedy rush toward reinvention. I handed him a check for his share of the furniture, packed my clothes, my books, the little pieces of myself, and moved into a modest loft downtown. It wasn't luxury, but it was mine, and for the first time in months, I could breathe without measuring my worth against his expectations. That should have been the end. Our story, closed and filed away like old tax records. But life, especially the cruel kind, doesn't fold so neatly. 3 weeks later, my phone rang past midnight. Adrian's name lit up the screen. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Marissa?" His voice cracked, frantic. "Please, you have to help me." In the background, I heard drawers slamming, footsteps pacing. Panic poured through every word. "I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know. He took everything." I let silence stretch, holding the phone like it was burning my hand. Somewhere deep inside, I wasn't surprised. "Call your new life for help," I said finally. My voice was steady, but my heart raced. "I'm not part of it anymore, remember?" He gasped. "Please, just listen. You don't understand." But I did understand. I understood more than he thought, because weeks earlier, at his father's funeral, I had caught a moment most people overlooked. His father had gripped my arm gently, his bourbon-scented breath close to my ear. "You're the only thing keeping him grounded," he whispered. "If he ever lets you go, watch what happens next." At the time, I thought it was grief talking, an old man's rambling fears. But that night, with Adrian's desperation echoing in my ear, I realized his father had meant every word. And I wasn't done uncovering what those words truly meant. After I hung up on Adrian's desperate call, I sat alone in my loft, the city humming faintly through the windows. I poured myself a glass of wine and leaned back in the creaky armchair that came with the place. It wasn't luxury, but it was mine, and the quiet was a kind of peace I hadn't known in years. But his voice clung to me. The panic, the disbelief, the way he said, "I didn't know." I almost pitied him, almost. Because the truth was, I had known. Not everything, not at first, but enough. Weeks earlier, after his father's funeral, I found myself cornered in the study by the estate attorney. A graying man with sharp eyes and an even sharper folder of papers. He hadn't meant to show me, I think. But grief loosens lips, and suspicion sharpens them. His words echoed in my mind now. "Your boyfriend is reckless, Ms. Hale." His father anticipated this. Buried deep in the second addendum of the will was a clause, a trap dressed as a safeguard. Should Adrian separate from me, within 90 days of his father's death, the entire $5 million would be redirected to charities and veterans programs. Every cent, gone in the blink of a legal stamp. Adrian filed for separation 17 days after the funeral. 17. Not even 3 weeks. I remembered how smug he looked, tossing his suitcase into the back of his car, whistling like a man who had won the lottery. He had no idea that the winning ticket turned to ash the moment he let go of me. And now his ash was choking him. I pictured his new life unraveling piece by piece. The luxury car with payments already due. The penthouse lease signed with premature bravado. The bakery staff he fired without a second thought, replaced by glittering influencers who promised to rebrand his late father's company. All of it collapsing like a tower built on quicksand. He thought money made him untouchable, but his father's will had made sure it was a leash, and he had yanked it too hard. I could have warned him. The words sat heavy on my chest, like an unspoken confession. I could have told him the day he stood in that kitchen, the day he threw 11 years away for dollar signs. One sentence from me could have saved him. But I didn't, because I wanted him to feel it, the same crushing freefall I felt when he said I wasn't needed anymore. The hollow thud of realizing the person you trusted most could discard you without a second thought. If life was going to teach him, I wasn't going to interfere. 3 days passed before the next call came. This time the arrogance was gone. His voice was thin, raw. Marissa, I made a mistake. I let silence stretch long enough for him to squirm. Then I asked softly, which one? Leaving me, filing for separation, or assuming the money would last forever? He sniffled, and for a moment I wondered if he was crying. I didn't know. My father never told me about a clause. Your father did, I said. My voice hardened, remembering that whispered warning. You just didn't listen. I could hear his breathing, uneven. He was sitting somewhere alone, probably that overpriced penthouse, with rent already circling like a predator. Then he dropped the real bombshell. Can we talk in person? I almost laughed. Almost. But instead I whispered, sure, my lawyer will be there too. Marissa, please, no lawyers. Just you and me, like it used to be. And that's when I knew. This wasn't about regret. This wasn't about love. Adrian was plotting something. Desperation sharpens liars, and I could hear it sharpening him now. I hung up, my pulse steady. If he wanted a meeting, he would get one, but on my terms. Because for the first time in 11 years, I wasn't the one standing on quicksand. I was the one watching him sink. We agreed to meet at the cafe down the street from the old house. The same cafe where Adrian and I once spent lazy Sundays, sharing pastries and circling cabins and glossy magazines, pretending we'd buy one someday. Back then, he'd hold my hand across the chipped wooden table and promise me forever. Now, I walked in and saw him already seated, hunched forward, his designer suit crumpled like a costume that no longer fit. His hair was slicked back too carefully, a disguise that couldn't cover the exhaustion shadowing his eyes. He looked up when I entered, and for a split second I saw the Adrian I used to know, the boy who laughed when the toaster caught fire, who kissed me under pouring rain because we didn't own an umbrella. But that version of him was gone, buried under greed and arrogance. Marissa, he said softly, rising to pull out my chair. His voice was coated in sugar, too sweet to be real. I sat down, folding my hands in my lap to stop them from trembling. What do you want, Adrian? He hesitated, searching my face like it held the lifeline he needed. I didn't leave because I stopped loving you. I left because... His gaze dropped to the scratched tabletop. I thought I could have more. The honesty was bitter, not cleansing. It wasn't regret. It was the admission of a gambler who lost his bet. I made a terrible miscalculation, he whispered. That word, miscalculation, cut deeper than any apology could. It told me everything. He didn't regret betraying me. He regretted losing the jackpot. I leaned back, studying him the way you study a stranger. You're right, I said. You did miscalculate. His eyes flickered with hope. So maybe we can fix this. I almost pitied him. Almost. Instead, I pulled a black folder from my bag and slid it across the table. He frowned, opening it with trembling hands. Inside lay the finalized documents, papers filed, stamped, and legally binding. His separation had already been made permanent. You filed without me? His voice cracked, eyes wide with disbelief. You filed first, I said calmly. I just finished what you started. He sat frozen, as though the chair had turned to stone beneath him. Marissa, please, don't do this. I need you. The words might have moved me once, but now I heard the desperation under them, not for me, but for what I represented. Stability, credibility, a lifeline his father's money couldn't buy. I stood gathering my coat. By Friday, you'll be free, I said evenly, just like you wanted. His hand shot across the table, grasping mine before I could move. No lawyers, he whispered. No more games. Just us, like before. I looked down at his fingers, clutching mine with a grip that wasn't love, it was fear. He was plotting something. I could feel it in the tremor of his hand, the dart of his eyes. And in that moment, I knew Adrian wasn't just desperate, he was dangerous. The past 11 years had taught me how easily charm could turn into a trap, and this time I wasn't going to be caught. I didn't go home after that cafe meeting. Instead, I walked 2 blocks further, into a small office with blinds drawn and a brass plate on the door that read, Elias Morgan, Private Investigations. Elias had been my quiet ally for months. Long before Adrian's inheritance, I felt something unraveling between us. The late-night calls he stepped outside to take, the weekends away that never appeared on our joint credit card, receipts tucked into his jacket pockets, hotels, restaurants, places I'd never been invited to. At first, I thought it was infidelity. That suspicion alone had been enough for me to hire Elias. But what he uncovered was far worse than adultery. 2 weeks before Adrian's call, Elias had slid a folder across this same desk, his expression grim. Inside were bank documents that turned my stomach. An offshore account opened in my name, without my knowledge, without my signature. 3 separate deposits of $500,000 each had been funneled into it over the course of a year. And the transfers? They were initiated by Adrian. His fingerprints, his devices, his trail. The plan was obvious. When things got ugly, and he must have known they would, he'd accuse me of theft. He'd paint me as the gold digger who siphoned off his inheritance. He'd walk away clean, leaving me to drown under fraud charges. It was brilliant, if I hadn't seen it coming. But Elias had given me evidence. Copies of the transfers, metadata from the devices, even voice recordings of Adrian confirming account details over the phone. All of it tucked neatly in a folder now resting in my bag, the same one I had carried to the cafe. That night I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't even feel surprised. Just cold clarity. Adrian hadn't only betrayed me as a partner, he had tried to destroy me as a person. His father hadn't just left him money, he had left him a seat on the board of Horizon Group, the company he built from nothing. A company whose bylaws were as strict as iron when it came to public scandal, fraud, and misappropriation. And Adrian, blind in his arrogance, had handed me every weapon I needed. By Monday morning, a sealed envelope landed on the desk of Horizon's CEO and legal counsel. Inside, the bank documents, the transfer logs, the investigator's notes, and my signed statement. At 10:15 a.m., Adrian was escorted out of the Horizon building. By noon, his corporate accounts were frozen. By 2, my phone buzzed with the message I had been waiting for. "Why are you doing this to me?" I stared at the words, a bitter laugh rising in my throat. Doing this to him? He had plotted to ruin me, and now he was drowning in the tide he stirred. I typed back slowly, each word deliberate. "You wanted freedom, Adrian. Now you're free. From everything." What he didn't know yet was that the worst part was still to come, because the money was gone. His reputation was shattered, and the woman he had left me for, the one who paraded at his side the moment the inheritance cleared, had already fled the country with what scraps remained. His ex-girlfriend, his great prize. She left him too. Adrian had always wanted more. Now he had nothing. The first article broke 3 days later. Scandal at Horizon Group. Founder's son accused of fraud. It wasn't just a headline, it was a wrecking ball. Within hours, former employees, colleagues, even family friends began whispering to reporters. The whispers grew into stories, and the stories into accusations. Adrian hadn't only funneled inheritance money into secret accounts, he had siphoned funds from the charitable foundation his father built. The foundation meant to feed children, to fund cancer treatments for women in rural towns, to carry the family name with dignity. And Adrian had treated it like his personal wallet. Handbags, secret trips, investments in his ex-girlfriend's shady startup. Elias had found receipts for all of it, and now the evidence was public. I never wanted to stand in front of a camera, but the board of the foundation demanded an explanation. So I did. I stood before the press, my palms clammy, my voice steadier than I expected. To every donor and every family who trusted us, I want to say I am sorry. I had no idea the man I once loved was capable of such betrayal, but I promise you this, Every stolen cent will be returned, and those responsible will face justice. Then I held up a copy of the signed criminal complaint I had filed with the Financial Crimes Unit that morning. The cameras flashed, questions shouted, but I walked away knowing the truth had been set free. The fallout was immediate. Adrian was banned from Horizon's board indefinitely. Donors launched lawsuits. His ex-girlfriend vanished overseas with the last of their stolen funds. By nightfall, his name was smeared across every business outlet, his face plastered under the word fraud. That night, my phone lit up again. His voice cracked through the speaker, a ghost of the man I once loved. "Marissa, please. They're saying I could go to prison. This was all a mistake. You can stop this." I glanced at the framed photo I hadn't yet taken down, a younger version of us, smiling in the glow of hope. My chest tightened, but I stayed steady. "You're right," I whispered. "It was a mistake, but not mine." And then I hung up, for the last time. Within weeks, everything he clung to collapsed. The penthouse was repossessed after he missed payments. His so-called friends vanished like smoke. His ex left him with nothing but debts. And his mother, once his fiercest defender, called me sobbing, saying, "I had no idea he could stoop this low." But I didn't gloat. I didn't even smile, because I realized this story was never about him. It was about what I would become after him. From the ashes of betrayal, I rebuilt. The foundation, once tarnished by Adrian's greed, became my mission. We renamed it the Phoenix Trust, because sometimes you have to burn before you rise. Within a year, we rebuilt 3 shelters, sponsored dozens of students, and created programs for spouses blindsided by financial abuse. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about purpose. One evening, my niece tugged at my hand, her eyes wide. "Aunt Marissa, are you glad it happened? That Adrian left?" I crouched down, brushing hair from her face. My throat tightened, but I answered honestly, "No. But I'm glad I survived it, and I'm proud that I never became like him." She nodded, as if she understood more than a child should, and whispered, "Mom said Adrian chose money, but you chose us." I hugged her tightly, feeling the weight of truth settle into something lighter. In the end, betrayal didn't break me. It refined me. Adrian's empire crumbled into dust. Mine rose from it. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying someone. It's thriving without them, and making sure the world knows exactly who you are, while they fade into the shadows of who they pretended to be.